Hi there, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Today I'm going to give you a charcoal drawing tutorial with 9 tips on how to use charcoal. My name is Vanessa and I make art videos about a little bit of this and that. If that speaks to you, consider subscribing. We'll talk about each one of these materials as the video goes on and as I use them. What I'm going to do to start is I'm going to tape the edges with this painting tape. This is from Scotch Blue, and make a border around the edges. This is helpful when handling it afterwards. It just frames it nicely, so when you grab the paper, you're not touching the charcoal. So let me do that and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have everything taped, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some fine charcoal and tone the ground, and that will be our first step. This is done to add and subtract values. Okay, so I have my fine charcoal and some other materials that you'll see here. I'm going to go ahead and rub this into the background and then blend it into the paper with a paper towel. So I'm going to use a paper towel because that is something that everyone should have in their home. If you want to take it to the next level, what I traditionally do is I use a chamois, and this is an artistic chamois. It's made for blending, and you can get this at any art store. This one I bought years ago, which was $3.99, but I'm sure nowadays it's probably more expensive, but this is a brand new one. I'll go ahead and use the paper towel. Go ahead and break the stick so I can get that. I took a soft fine charcoal and I just went over it all over and then blended. This is my second round with a paper towel. If you want to level up and use something like this cloth, which is this is what it looks used. This is what it looks like brand new. You can get it at your local art store. A chamois. You can use that to rub it into the paper. So just know that depending on what type of paper towel or brand or whatever, you might get some of the paper fibers breaking up and you'll get a little bit of that streaking, but that's okay. This is just the foundation. We can always go back and develop it. This is the beginning stage. We're going to work on this in stages and layers to develop the composition. So I'm going to go in and finish adding the fine charcoal. When starting a drawing, do not get caught up in the details. Those will come later as you develop your drawing. For my base, now if you want to level it up and not use your vine charcoal, this is more of the affordable route. But if you were to do the math, this might be more cost effective. I'm not too sure, but if you don't want to fork out 20 bucks for a tub of charcoal powder, you can do the same thing by putting charcoal powder on here and then working that into your paper. I did test this out in my sketchbook, and so it looks like that as the ground, and I did some lifting with a kneaded eraser to kind of just carve out areas and test out this, and it works really well. But if you don't have charcoal powder, fine charcoal is the go-to. Okay, go ahead and take your paper towel and work it into the paper. Okay, so you have your ground set. I'm just going to kind of, you have like a blow dryer or a drafting brush, a large paintbrush. Dust off any fibers from the paper towel so that doesn't affect your drawing. And it's not lifting too much, it's not removing, it's removing some of the vine charcoal, which is to be expected. You can just clean that up with soap and water. The contour drawing phase, I'm going to teach you about how to draw with accuracy. I have my reference picture in front of me, and I'm going to start putting down some line work, reference points to help me draw my subject. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the baseline very lightly with my Vine charcoal. I like to do my sketching with Vine because it's very soft and light, and if I mess up, I can just blend it out with my finger or a blending stump, a paper towel, whichever you prefer. I want it to go to somewhere right here. Making reference points, I know this is generally where the bottom's going to be, generally where the top's going to be, and work around that. This line is slightly tilted. I'm looking for those angles and trying to copy them the best I can. So tip 3, start off with basic shapes. Make sure to look at your reference constantly. Copy shapes and angles you see. This method is called citing. You know what? This needs to come up further. This goes a little bit angled. This is more angled. The vase is actually more surface area than the actual plant itself. So I want to make sure that I do that on my drawing. And I want to draw what I see and not draw what I think I see. This is something that has stuck with me as an artist from my art teacher in high school. Mrs. Thompson was a phenomenal art teacher. She inspired me to do what I do today. Okay, this is pretty dark here, so I'm just going to put some lines to notate that. Like I said, draw what I see. I'll go back and I can fine-tune that. This angle's this way. This angle's there. This comes actually here. You can work from a photograph or work from actual observation, like live. You set up a light, spotlight. So this whole time I am looking at my reference and citing the angles for angle and shape for shape that I see on my reference picture. For shapes, and rather thinking of it as a plant, I'm trying to make it very general to begin with. Copying shapes, angles. This is called citing, and you are employing the right side of your brain when you do this process. It helps with accuracy and you build an artistic eye. This comes from that book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. A lot of art teachers have read this. It is a gem. It really teaches you to see like an artist and to teach, actually. You can teach others and teach yourself this way. Again, looking for shapes. Trying to stop telling myself this is a plant, this is a leaf. Another important thing to keep in mind as you are doing the preliminary sketch is to look at the negative space as much as you look at the positive space. Remember, the negative space defines what we see in the positive space. You will see shapes and shadows. I'm going back and changing as needed. You want to make sure that the structure of your foundation drawing is strong and accurate. Get all that squared away before you even add any values. Fix this here. I'll go back to that later. And when I'm drawing, I want to look at the negative space. This little section here is like a little bit of a triangle, as much as I look at the positive space, which is the actual object itself, because that will help me to put down accurate line work and shapes. Once you make citing, looking at angles, shapes, positive and negative space a habit, this will make you a strong artist and you can draw anything that you want to draw. simplified to more detail and build little by little. And the more you practice this, the faster you get at it. It just takes practice to get the results that you want. And you'll have good practices, you'll have ones not so good, but it's part of the journey, and we're learning, constantly learning. A lot of times we get stuck on the outcome, which is a huge reward, but we want to enjoy the process too, because that's part of making art. I know that this relationship here on the picture touches there, and then this one, that's about right there. So I'm going to stand back and look at it. I'm going to stand back and look at it and see what I need to fix. So as I stand back, I'm propping it up and looking at it from a distance. I see some inconsistencies that I need to fix. This shape. So what I do is I hold my arm out and then I check my angles and see this needs to come more like this. And then I go there, and then I check this one. Try not to move my arm, it goes like that. Okay, fix that. And then I fix it. This is pretty close. Okay, and then I compare it. This right here needs to be lower. See where that line is, or that point? I have that back line too high. It needs to come right over here. So then I'll make those corrections. And you kind of just go through your whole thing, check your angles, and look for accuracy. The next phase of the drawing is to start plugging in darker values. Okay, so I pretty much have the scale and proportion as I wanted, and now what I'm going to do is introduce you to two other charcoal tools. This stick is a compressed charcoal, and this is good for darker values. This one is pretty dark also. It's in a 2B, a medium, so it can get kind of like in the middle where you can range it from, depending on the amount of pressure and layering, you can get it light or dark. And I'm going to go ahead and start assigning more specific values, and I'm actually going to drop in darker values so I can start separating areas and add the first layer of shading. So I know that this is darker, and once I start adding all the layers, it's going to start to come together. So again, I'm putting in the darker values, placing them, assigning them as I see them, copying those shapes. Later on I can go in, after I plug these in, use my paper towel or my finger, a blending stump, and work it into the paper so that it locks into the paper. That compressed charcoal is good for large areas. The pencil is good for more detailed, specific areas. So I'll go ahead and plug those in. It's going to take me a minute, so I'll show you what I'm going to do off camera. I'm going to rub and blend it. You can use a paper towel. I've just been doing this way. It maybe drives some of you nuts, but this is my go-to way of pressing this into the paper. So just trust the process. It will come together. This is just the beginning stage, and little by little it's going to look more like my reference. Not identical, close enough. See how now you can start seeing it come together, and then that makes it easier for you to go to the next phase and add, fine-tune your dark areas, go in with your medium tones, and then erase your highlights. Edge, I'm looking for edges. This edge is dark here. I know it's pretty dark here. It's pretty dark here. I know because this is my plant that it goes this way, but again, I'm drawing what I see, not what I think I see. From my reference, it looks like this, and the values that are from this photo. So that is the general shape. There's a little bit of a glow reflected light there, so I'm going to leave that light. Looking at my picture most of the time, I've gotten to the habit of doing this since I've been in college, and I'm like constantly going back and looking at my reference. It's just a habit that you will develop, and it takes time to get there, where it becomes easy. At first it's uncomfortable to keep looking away from your paper. There are no lines, just edges, but I'm just putting some lines as placement reference so that I can go back and shade. It's pretty much like shading with your pencil, just honestly a little bit quicker to lay down values. I know that this value is darker than this one, so I'm going to darken this and then eventually go back and lighten that, but I'm not getting too picky with my values just yet. This is just general values that I'm putting down. I know this needs to get lighter. What I also can do to help with the values, assigning values, I know from my reference that this is very white. So I can go ahead and take my eraser. In this case, I have a kneaded eraser. You can use a big pearl eraser. Those are fantastic. I use both, but I don't have one on hand at the moment. I need to go find where I have my pink pearl and make this edge. Remember, there's no lines, there's edges where one surface meets the other. I do apologize for the shaky camera. This is the only setup that I have at the moment to do my drawings. I'm going to ease up my pressure as I go here because this is slowly fades to a value right here. So just like how you draw with your pencil, a graphite pencil, and your charcoal pencil, pressure, same thing you can do with your eraser drawing. Adjust pressure as needed. And so this edge here, these edges where the light source is right here. It's kissing the leaves. This is lighter. This is not as light, but still pretty close to this side here. And the more accurate you can make your values, kind of makes up for if you have your drawing inaccurate as far as scale and proportion. I mean, if you're doing something precise like a portrait, that's, you gotta get your scales and proportions right on. But if it's something organic like a plant or a cloud, you can get away with inaccuracies in your drawing skills with copying what you see, the line work. But if you work on your value range and get that as close to your reference, that will make up for it. Just depends on what you're drawing. And so now I have more contrast. This is darker here, so I'm going to go in with this fine charcoal. And so once I darken this, it'll lighten this area by contrast. I use my paper towel to soften this. So I'm going to look at it from a distance and come back and see what I need to do. Stand back. A couple minutes later. Okay, so I'll go back and rework areas and see what happens. Using any of these tools, all these tools. This is easy to erase. This is good for detail. This is good for darker areas. So from here on out on finishing this drawing, I'm going to time lapse it. Otherwise, this will be a very long video, and it's already a long one as it is. Tip number 7, keep going and layer. Adjust and fine-tune values as needed. This is based on your reference image. You need to match value to value. The darks, mediums, lights, and everything in between. Okay, a couple things to remember. The fine charcoal is great for lighter values, outlining, because it tends to be lighter. The charcoal pencil is great for detailing in smaller areas, and the big stick of compressed charcoal is for larger areas and super dark areas. I will constantly look at it from a distance and evaluate it to check for inaccuracies. Tip number 8, last step in the drawing phase, add white pastel for highlights. Only use the white pastel for the pure white brightest spots. Not overdo it by adding the white pastel to the quote-unquote light values. Light values are not considered white of the paper or a highlight. Overdoing it with the white pastel will lose its impact and effect on your drawing. Tip number 9. Once you are content with the results, spray fixative to seal the charcoal. If you do not have fixative, you can use hairspray. Make sure you do it in a well-ventilated area. Do not spray too close, approximately 8 to 10 inches away. You can apply a few coats, give a few minutes in between applications. Well, that wraps it up, ladies and gentlemen. That was a long one with a lot of information. I hope you found it helpful and or entertaining. And go out there and make some beautiful charcoal drawings. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.